This is SoundStory, and we're speaking with Anita Swick. Anita, thanks for being here to talk about your story.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
This is a very interesting one for me because you have come a fairly long way to record this. Tell me a little bit about your background and where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Hillsboro, Illinois, and excuse me, I grew up in the country just outside Hillsboro, and I was an only child. My parents were older. I was also an only grandchild on both sides. So, growing up in the country, of course, I didn't have a next-door neighbor, the kids to play with and that. But there was one family out in the neighborhood that we would get together quite often. But it was different, I think, from the way a lot of people grow up. Honestly, my pets and the animals were that's what I entertained myself with.
When you look back on it, was it lonely, or were you good at entertaining yourself and being creative in how you filled your time?
Yes, it wasn't lonely. I could always play house, imagine out in the barn, out in the hayloft. I never really was lonely. I can remember my parents going to the field to work and being in the bottom area where there's tall grass and that, and mashing down the grass to make rooms like a house to play house in. But no, I can't say I was ever really lonely.
So you grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
What did, as you were growing up, what did your parents farm or grow?
Well, actually, they had, corn and beans, and of course we had cattle. We had dairy cattle, and we had hogs. Actually, my mother was the farmer. Her father passed away, and when he did, she quit her job in town for a doctor and stayed at home to farm because she had no siblings. And then she married my dad, and he was a teacher. He, at the time, was living in a house that belonged to his great-grandparents. Their story is that my dad would go coon hunting, and he moved in that house after he got out of the service, and he'd go coon hunting, and my mom baked the best angel food cake, and that's how they met. And then the farms were actually joined together later on in the 50s.
That is really interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems like a role reversal for that time, that your mother would be the farmer and your father would be the teacher.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So did your dad help with the farm? Did young Anita have to help with the farm chores?
He helped in the summer, but like all the milking my mother did and a lot of the farm work. When she went to get Social Security, they questioned it, and there actually had to be witnesses from the neighbors that she had actually done the farming.
Wow. Farm work, especially dairy farming, is not one of those jobs that you can get away from or take a vacation from.
Yes.
So what was that like for your parents and for you?
Well, we took one vacation. We went to Colorado one time, but no, the cows were there to be milked twice a day.
The girls need to be milked.
Yeah.
How many cows are we talking about?
Oh, back at that time, in the 50s, that was probably 10 to 15. Yeah.
When you were growing up on the farm, what did you think about or dream about? Did you see yourself leaving the farm and doing other things, or did you always know that you wanted to pursue that and keep doing it?
I can't really say for sure. As far as, I guess I always knew I would live in the country. And I think because I was the only child, I knew I'd never go far from home. So.
And then when you grew up, did you say that when you got married, you also were the primary person doing the farming?
Oh, no. I mean, they, my mom and dad, of course, then rented out the farm. So, I mean, the dairy cattle were sold. This was probably back in the 60s. And then the farm was rented out, just as it is now.
What is the farming community like today in the Hillsborough area compared to what it was when you were growing up?
Well, there aren't any farms like we used to have where I remember studying it in social studies and finding out I actually lived on a mixed farm because we had hogs and we had cattle, and they don't have that anymore. And most all of it is grain. Now, on our farm nowadays, my daughter, they have a few beef cattle, and but back then you had your hogs, your cattle, your chickens, you did it all, and then the grain too, of course.
How big were the schools where you were growing up when you went to high school? What was that high school, and how big was it?
Actually, it was probably bigger then than it is now. It was probably about 500 to 600 in the high school. Yeah.
That is pretty big.
Yeah, back then.
And you mentioned that at least one of your daughters also does farming today?
Well, they live out in the country, and they have, I guess you'd probably call it like a hobby farm. They raise the beef cattle, and they have some chickens. So
that is interesting too, because I know one of the problems in rural areas is that the younger generations don't want to stay near the farm and they move away.
Right.
But what's the situation with you? You have one daughter at least who lives close to did all of your children stay relatively near?
Oh, no. My other daughter lives in Highland, which is about 40 miles? I don't know, from me. And then, of course, my son is in Maryland. So
very interesting. All right. Yeah. So Anita's growing up on a farm outside of Hillsborough. You graduate from high school, and what happens then? Where did you go?
Well, I went to college, SIUE, but I also got married right out of high school. And then about a year later, my daughter was born, Alicia. So I wanted to stay home with her. And so I stayed home. I taught private piano and would do a big garden, made the kids clothes. I always felt like that was taking the place of working outside the home.
Oh, sure. A child and piano lesson sounds like a handful right there.
Not really. They all grew up with that. So they would sleep in a bassinet next to the piano and the other, just the room next to it. So
you were a young mom.
Yeah, I guess I was.
What was that like? You were probably 19 or so with your first child, staying home and doing piano lessons. Can you talk a little bit about when you think back on that time? What are your memories of it?
My mom and dad lived just a few steps almost down the road from me, and my mom was there to help. But that's something I always wanted. Growing up as a child and being the only one, I wanted brothers and sisters more than anything. So the Sears catalog would come, and I'd look through the catalog trying to find outfits for the baby brother or sister I'd never get, But so I really wanted to have family.
And so then you ended up having 2 more after that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Would you have had, 10 more if you could have?
No, I probably stopped where I was at.
It's interesting that only children usually always wanted a sibling. Did your children, because there were 3 of them, did they appreciate that they had each other? Because I think siblings do tend to not feel that way.
I hope they did. I always told them I wanted them to be close, that I I used to tell them I'd come back and get them if they weren't. I just that was really important to me.
When they were little, all three of them kind of running around, what kind of things did they do? What are your memories of them as, a trio running around the farm?
Well, as a trio, I don't know, they would play. I can remember them playing down in what used to be the hog lot, where there was this tree broken down and stuff. And, of course, we always had animals, the dogs. And for Alicia especially, her grandma and grandpa would take her, and they go to the sale barn, and things like that. Unfortunately, Amanda and Garrett didn't get to enjoy my parents as much. But, yeah, I think mostly playing outside and that. So,
do they ever talk to you about their reflections of their childhood? I imagine it was, fun to be, I think, being a city kid, it'd be fun to be running around in those barns and hanging out with animals.
I don't know. They don't talk about it a whole lot, really. And of course, I mean, at that time we built a house that wasn't too far from my parents. And, I mean, we didn't, have the animals right there at the house and stuff like that, really. And by that time, actually, my parents had retired and the animals were more, gone. But
do you have a favorite animal?
Gosh, I don't know. I had all kinds. I had a pig that I used to ride. Her name was Rosie. I had, of course, the dogs. We're all dog lovers. I don't know, and to pick out a favorite dog would be hard. Probably Beverly. She was a dog that came to the house, actually not in my childhood, but when my kids were little, and she sat under our bedroom window and she howled all night, so we named her Beverly Sills. And of course I had a horse named Trigger when I was a child, and he was probably one of my favorites too. So,
you mentioned that you were a piano teacher. What is your piano background, and do you still teach or play?
I still play. I quit teaching once I went to work full time. I taught for 13 years private piano. Music was my major in school, and I took piano lessons from the time I was in second grade through high school. I also took vocal lessons too and sang. So.
And what did you do with that? Other than teaching, did you perform places?
Mainly church. We used to do a lot of weddings. My ex-husband, and I would do weddings. He would play piano or organ, and when the kids were little.
Did you teach your children to play piano?
Actually, they took lessons from someone else, but I've got one of them. I think Amanda has done more with it than, any of the others. So
yeah, it's hard sometimes to teach your own children.
Yeah.
I know how that goes. So you mentioned that you stayed at home, you were with the kids and taught piano privately, and then you left to get a job. Mm-hmm. What happened there? Did you want to leave the house, or where did you go?
Well, Garrett had just started preschool, and of course the girls were already in school, and their dad said, well, maybe I should look for a full-time job. Probably tired of having people in the house all the time. So anyway, of course, with this, a friend of mine had gotten a job with the school district. So that's, of course, my dad was a teacher, and his father and mother were teachers and that. So kind of that was the natural thing to do. Of course, I didn't have my degree, but I got a job then as a teacher's aide. So I worked with special education kids.
Oh, that's wonderful, because we definitely need more special education teachers.
It was very rewarding, though. It really was. And back then, there weren't the restrictions that there are now. I mean, I could actually do some lesson plans and actually work with the individual kids, So I did that for, let's see, 10 years. And then worked with kindergarten for 2 years, and then went into the office at the elementary school.
So when you're living or growing up around Hillsboro, where do you go to have a good time?
Oh, well, there's not too many places I can think of. I'd like to go out for the evening or something like that. You go to Springfield or to, St. Louis. That really, there's just not too much in that way there.
When you were a teenager, what did the kids from high school do?
Ride around. It just, go to football games and stuff like that. Yeah, it wasn't, and of course, and I just wasn't a real adventuresome person either.
Do you think that things like the internet and social media has kind of made the world a little smaller for kids who are growing up in that area now, or connected it a little bit more to other places?
I think so. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Because I'm wondering if you compared your teen years with your children's teen years in the same area, was it different, or did they ride around?
I think it was a whole lot different. And when you ride around, if you'd ask my oldest one, Alicia, because when she got her license, she was given so many miles she could go. And it was like up around the courthouse and down and home, So that's always been a big joke in the family.
I noticed that you also, for a while, sold Avon.
Well, yeah. Okay, so when we got married, like I said, I was right out of high school, and he was working for SIUE in one of the, I think he was part of the publicity for the Mississippi River Festival, and they cut back the budget at school, so he'd lost his job, and that was like the day before we got married. So it was like, okay, so what can I do? So I sold Avon. That's when I started teaching piano lessons. And then I also got a job at a dress shop in town.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were you living on a farm at that time, too?
We were living in a 2-room apartment that shared a bathroom with a beauty shop.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a little different.
I was going to say, I don't know how you do all those jobs and farm at the same time.
Oh, no. We were both in school, and so.
Did you ever attend that Mississippi River Festival?
Yes. It was great.
Yeah, I've heard wonderful things, but obviously have never done it.
It was great.
What was it like selling Avon at that time? Because I remember growing up the Avon thing, and that's just not a thing anymore.
Well, it used to be. I mean, I was lucky in that I took over somebody else's little route or whatever, and so I had the customers were all set up. So that's basically all I did was regularly touch base with them. I didn't have to venture out from that, but yeah.
That sounds really interesting. And also, you mentioned a dress shop. Mm-hmm. Was that in Hillsboro?
It was in Hillsboro. It was called Heslov's. It was, of course, on the main street. Back at that time, our stores were open on Friday night. And so I would work on Friday nights and Saturdays. And, so it was one of the more upscale dress shops in the town.
And when people would come in to get upscale dresses, were they getting them for weddings or galas or what?
No, and I say upscale. It was, but no, not to that extent. Yeah, it was just your better clothing compared to maybe the other dress shop in town.
Yeah, in a time when women wore dresses most of the time.
Yes. Yes. And we had to wear them to work. And I mean, to work there and stuff. So
Now we just wear athleisure wear.
yes, much better.
So you mentioned getting married very young, and then you got divorced. But at some point in between, did you say that your ex-husband's farm and your farm joined?
Not my ex-husband's, but my mom and dad's.
Oh, got
my
it.
dad's family and my mom's family. Yeah.
So is that where you live today? Mm-hmm. So how big is that farm?
There's 460 acres.
And that's with the two combined?
Yeah, two combined.
So your mom had a farm and your dad's farm was next door?
It almost. My mom's parents had this farm, and then my dad's grandparents had a farm across the way. And then his father bought that farm, and that's where he was living. In between those two farms, there was about 80 to 100 acres. And then back in the 50s, my dad bought that. My dad bought out his brother's share of the farm when my grandfather passed. And then they joined the two farms together.
So what happens on that farm today?
Well, we raise corn and beans, and this year we have wheat around my house, which is the first time in several years that we've had wheat. I think it's a place for everybody to come home to.
I'm not sure that people who live here in the city, where we are right at this moment, appreciate what farming is truly like. If you were to kind of enlighten people who don't have a lot of farm experience, when we talk about subsidies and prices and weather and affecting crops, I mean, what is that like on a day-to-day basis when there's so many things that are out of your control?
Well, back when, just before after my dad passed away and I actually took over the farm, that's when, of course, we were done with the animals and that. But that's when you rented the farm like on thirds. And yes, part of the grain was mine. And so we would have to call and get prices on grain and decide when to sell it, and according to government subsidies too, But then it became much easier when we started going to cash rent, which is the way we do it today. So really, that took a lot of the, doubts and everything out of farming. So,
because that farming equipment is not cheap.
No, there's no way anyone, I don't think, could start farming today. I feel for those who do.
Are there kind of corporate farms in your area?
Not really what you'd say corporate, I don't think. There are those who rent the most acreage and stuff, but we have just started running with someone that is a smaller farmer and maybe get more personal care that way.
Have you noticed any changes? Because I know a lot of people are really into this farm to table and they want to know where their food comes from. Has that impacted the farming community where you are at all?
I think it is beginning to. And now the government actually gives some help doing cover crops for the farmers. That's one of the reasons we've chosen. And I say we because it's not just my choice. Everybody, my kids are all involved in it. Is they're using the cover crops now so they can use less fertilizer. Of course, the fertilizer doesn't always stay in the ground. It goes into your water, and then your towns have to, it costs them to take that out of the water. So that's what the people we're running to now they do more of the cover crops and less fertilizer and chemicals.
Well, that's, I'm sure, a good thing, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Earlier, when you had mentioned that to you the farm was like coming home, you seem like you might have gotten a little bit emotional there. Do you want to dig into that a little bit? Is it about your parents, or?
I just think I hope it'll always be that way. You know, a place for my kids and their kids to come and be together.
Yeah. Do you have the holiday gatherings and get-togethers at the farm?
We try to. It's hard, you know. But, yeah, we do. You know, my son and his family will come home at Christmas. You know, and it just, yeah, I hope it'll always be there for him. But, you know, we live in a different world nowadays, so.
It is difficult. I know. People get spread out. When you think back on some of the holidays that you spent with your kids on the farm, what are some of the things that you think about, the memories that make you smile, or any traditions that you had?
I don't know, just everybody being together on all the holidays, you know, I think that's the whole thing. I can't think of any certain Christmas that was special, but the kids always loved having their Christmas stockings, and, you know, we just keep adding them on.
Were you a Christmas Eve present opening family, or Christmas morning?
Christmas morning. Christmas Eve was spent with my in-laws and with their family. So, yeah. And then my mom and dad always just came up to our house, you know, so.
And who did the cooking?
I did, and my mom, of course, back then. But now, actually, my girls, everybody brings. It's not a burden for any one person. So,
well, that's good.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, because everybody always has a great time at Christmas except Mom, because she's stressing out about everything.
And it's not really that way. It's everybody helps.
Now, are there grandchildren in the picture yet?
Oh yes, Joshua Moore, and then Amanda has Caleb and Allie, and then Chrissy and Ben. Yeah.
So when you see them running around the farm, what is that like?
Oh, it was always great to have them all there together, you know. And then I do have 2 great-grandchildren that are Joshua's.
So the stockings indeed do keep
they
multiplying.
Do. They do.
Do you think, maybe it's too soon to tell with the grandkids and the great-grandkids, but do you think that they feel that connection to the land?
I think they do. I hope they do. I gave each of them a necklace or a money clip or whatever that has the coordinates for the farm. So they'll know that's always their place to come home to.
So your son who lives in Maryland, do you think that he would want to come home at some point and resettle on the farm?
I think maybe there is that desire to do that. I don't think it's probably conceivable. He shows a lot of interest in the farm and long distance, you know. He especially is interested in the regenerative farming. And so I think, you know, if it could be a possibility, yeah, I think he would. But
it seems like there have been a lot of changes in farming. You were just mentioning cover crops and things, but there's a lot of other things that have, I'm sure, changed since the 40s and 50s. Anything in particular that might have been difficult for your parents or for you on the farm, or any, you know, major changes that stick out to you?
I can't think of anything that would be a big change. other than just going to the rent, rather than farming yourself.
So when you were young Anita, if you were looking back now, what did you think your life would be like at this point? Has it worked out the way that you thought?
Not really, but, I think it's worked out well.
Yeah, you seem like a very happy person.
Yeah, I think so.
So when you would go to Springfield or did you say you're about halfway between Springfield and St. Louis?
Yeah.
What was that like when you would come to the city? Is it a big transition?
Oh, yeah. That was one thing I was very fortunate because my mom and dad, we didn't take vacations, but we did go to the Muni a lot, and the circus, and they always took me more so to St. Louis than to Springfield. In fact, I had a friend that I grew up with. She was from a large family, and she had told me a while back, she said, I wouldn't have gotten to go anywhere if it wasn't for you, because Mom and Dad always let me take a friend, and of course she was the one that usually went. But it was exciting to get to come to the city. I can remember one time my dad getting lost, and we ended up going down Gaslight Square, and that was, for a country girl and a child, that was quite something. But yeah, it was exciting. We come down to Stixbury and Fuller and Famous and Bar to see the Christmas floors and stuff. They always brought me down for that. And so I feel like I was very fortunate. I may not have had siblings, but I was fortunate to have my parents.
Well, and that's why you got to bring a friend along.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
When you have three kids, the friends don't get to go.
You don't take friends.
And what were your thoughts about the city? Because I know there are people who live just outside the city limits who don't want to come into the city. And here you are, girl from the farm here, just taking in the Muni and the Christmas lights.
Oh, it was exciting, of course, but it wasn't, I don't know. It became something that was usual because we did that every Christmas. They'd bring me to see that, and we would do it quite often. So it wasn't really anything scary,
When you think about the difference between what the world was like when you were growing up compared to your grandkids or your great-grandkids, what do you think about? Do you think that it's different for them or more difficult for them or easier? What are your thoughts on how they're growing up?
I think it's very different for them. I think it's concerning because they're exposed to so much more, and sometimes at such a younger age. And it concerns me in what the future holds for all of them. But I'm sure in the end it'll work out. That's the way they're growing up. So,
you mentioned singing and playing piano in church. Mm-hmm. Church seems like that's a big part of your life. You want to mention anything about?
Oh, I could not wait to sing in the choir, in the kids' choir in church. And I can remember my mother calling the choir director, and you had to be in second grade to do it. And anyway, that has always been an important thing in my life. And like right now, if I didn't have the activities at church, I wouldn't have much.
And what is that church?
St. Paul's Lutheran Church. I grew up in the Presbyterian Church, but we did change to St. Paul's back about 20, 25 years ago, maybe. I guess maybe getting closer to 30 years ago. So.
When you were growing up and you were mentioning, you did get to come to St. Louis and you would go to Springfield, but one vacation, did you ever feel like you were missing out, or did that seem fine? Did you ever have a desire to sort of travel or happy to stay home?
I did have a desire to travel. But that didn't bother me. When I was 11, I believe I was in sixth grade. I was starting sixth grade. My grandmother lived with us, and she was, I think, 82 at the time. And her brother lived in Los Angeles. And so I flew with her to Los Angeles and spent a couple of weeks out there. And that, of course, was exciting. Went to Disneyland and, the whole thing. But, I always did want to travel and see more. And that's something after I got married, that's something we always made a priority, was taking a vacation of some kind every year. So.
What are some of your favorite places that you traveled? Was this like vacations you took the kids on as well?
Yes. Well, we always liked to go to the beach. And it was close. We'd go straight to Gulfport and drive down there. Yeah, I just, and just being with the kids, that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, vacations and holidays definitely change when your kids get older.
Yes, they do.
Now, if you had to put together, say, the top 3 places that Anita would like to visit in, your perfect world, you could just pick 3 places. Where would you want to go?
Well, I love the national parks, so I would like to go to Yellowstone, but I also would like to go back to Hawaii and Mount Rushmore in Montana, up into the north, I believe.
Okay, so confession, when you were in Hawaii sitting on the beach, did you spend at least an hour thinking about what you could possibly do to stay in Hawaii? Because I think everybody does.
It would be nice to visit, but no. I like where I'm at.
So when you have free time, when you're not with the kids or grandkids or activities at church, what do you like to do? What's sort of, Anita's go-to for spending time?
Sewing and working in the yard. When it's decent, that's where I am.
Is it vegetables or flowers?
Oh, it's flowers and landscaping, and I do a lot of mowing. But no, that's what I really enjoy.
Do you have a favorite flower?
Oh, golly. Oh, yeah, my Gerber daisies, yeah.
Oh, I love those.
I know. I do, too. That's why I'm trying to bring 6 or 7 of them in the house to keep them from getting frostbite.
Are they perennial?
No, they're not, but I bring them in and put them in the basement, and they can make it through.
With the holidays coming up, are you one of those people who starts planning for the holidays way in advance?
I do. I've already told the kids to be thinking about, the grandkids to be thinking about what they want for Christmas. But my kids, what they have liked to do, and actually it's kind of selfish of me because this is what I like, is we take a vacation. We do a family vacation, and I rent a house. And we're going to Hocking Hills, Ohio in June, and hopefully everybody will be there. So.
And what's in Hocking Hills, Ohio?
Well, I read about this park there. It's a state park, and they have waterfalls. I love waterfalls and hiking and that. So,
when it comes to sewing, what do you sew?
Well, of course, when the kids were growing up, I was doing clothing, and now I'm started quilting. And I do quilting by hand, but I've also been piecing quilts. I'm just really getting started at that, but I do really love it.
Did you, by any chance, teach any of your children to sew?
Yeah, they were, Alicia and Amanda were in 4-H, and Amanda really didn't like it. It was back when she was, of course, my parents were alive, and my dad, he had the job of taking her to the 4-H meeting. And, of course, she would forget and ride the bus home. And So, but then Alicia did do, she went to State Fair even with some of the things she made. So, but neither one sew at all now.
Yeah. My mom is like you. She sewed all the time and tried to teach me, and
I really see.
just never stuck. So you had mentioned growing up as an only child and that you wanted siblings and wanted a big family. How do you feel that, do you feel like that made a big difference to have a lot of kids? Because now it sounds like I've lost count with the grandkids and the great grandkids, how many there are.
Oh, well, I don't know about if you get everybody, because we have boyfriends and girlfriends coming too now, so we get 15 or 16. But I love it. I mean, I love having them all there. Yeah.
Because when you were growing up as an only child, you dreamed about that, and now here you are. You made it happen.
Yes.
Do you think that your kids and grandkids know that was so important to you?
I think so. I mean, just because I've always tried to instill into them about being close and that. So I hope they do.
If you had to say what do you have a personal philosophy or a life lesson, a word of wisdom that you like to pass along?
Gosh, not really, other than, I don't know, just as family, to always be there, no matter what.
It sounds like you have been able to accomplish that.
I think so.
Yeah, I can tell that your family is very important to you. You're making me emotional now.
Yeah, and I don't know why I get like that.
No, it's fantastic. I mean, your family came here to support you just taping this today. So as you look forward, as you look ahead, do you have any dreams or hopes for how your family moves forward here, or anything on your family bucket list of things that you would like you all to accomplish?
To accomplish,
or maybe just something that you would love to do with them or on your own.
Just really, honestly, just a family trip, or just having them all home, all of them, for a week. That's the most important thing.
Excellent. Well, you had mentioned that you regret that your two younger children did not get to experience growing up with their grandparents. Is there anything that you would want to mention about your mom and dad? Something that you would like the rest of your family to know?
I guess just how important they were to them. I remember my mom saying after Alicia was born about how, your dad never made over you like that. He does over her. And, of course, Amanda and Garrett, too. I mean, they were older, by then. But my parents, that their grandkids were really important to them.
What do you think is the most important thing that your parents passed on to you?
A sense of family. Even though there wasn't much. And a sense of, how important our past is, and the farm, and, that it becomes a part of you.
Does the farm have a name?
Well, actually, it's called Butler Louis Farms, because that was my mother's maiden name and my dad's name. So, yeah.
And if you had an established date on the farm, how long has it been been that?
How long has it been that? Well, since Mom and Dad got married is what we usually go by, like 1950. My dad's family's farm was in 1876, and then my mother's side was in 1901. But
That goes back a long way.
Yeah,
I
it
can
does.
see why you get emotional thinking about what happens
Yeah.
to it in the future.
yeah.
Would you say that you have a greater attachment to the land than other people do? I mean, people might like their lawns, but but
Yeah, I think so. In some, I think because of knowing it came from my family and what they went through to hold on to it. I mean, like my mom, her dad died, and she came home to keep the farm through the Depression. And, the same thing actually on my dad's side. His grandparents, they had 6 girls, and her husband died, and then she actually added acreage to the farm. And, they're strong women.
I was going to say strong farm women. Really, that's a lot to wrap your arms around.
Yeah.
So in conclusion, would you say that it's fair to say that looking back on your life, it's been a good one?
Oh, it has. It has.
Yeah, it seems
It's
like,
been very good.
and that if people were wondering what to get you for a gift, it sounds like what you really love is experiences.
Yeah.
Because
I
it gets
think
hard
so.
when you get older, right? You're like, I don't need stuff.
It does. It does. And you're right. Experiences is the best.
Well, I hope you have a fantastic trip to Ohio
Oh,
upcoming
thank you.
and a wonderful holiday seaon.
Thank
Is there
you.
anything else before we wrap up that you would want your children to know or that we haven't asked about Anita Swick?
Oh, my goodness. I don't know. I just want them to know how much I love them and how important all of them are to me.
Well, that is very, very evident. Anita, it was a pleasure meeting and talking with you.
Thank you.